Hi, this is Dwight Barry. I've got a short presentation about the use of GIS across the curriculum. There are a variety of uses for GIS, and the reason for using them in higher education are pretty varied, which I'll get to in just a moment. But first, the main point about using GIS in any class is that GIS provides you, no matter what discipline you're in, provides you the ability to make visual arguments. GIS is going to be as common a job requirement as word processing or spreadsheet use, probably within the next 10 years. But also, in terms of higher education, it provides us the ability to enhance textual arguments or to provide students a visual means by which they can create thesis statements and think critically about any information that they're exploring. What is GIS? Well, it refers to either geographic information systems, which are the computer mapping tools, or geographic information science, which covers the whole discipline. The power of GIS allows us to take map representations of the real world and stack them together for the purposes of analysis. And the way to do this is by linking each map layer to a specific database. So there could be a point on your map, and this is from the City of Austin's Water Quality Assessment Program, a point on the map that corresponds to water quality measurements over time. So the database takes that spatial information from a map and provides you the ability to do fairly sophisticated analysis. In terms of products of GIS, maps are the most obvious. And maps, whether it's from GIS or maps in general, they're basically spatial narratives. This is a map done by Menard in the late 1800s, and it's a map of Napoleon's invasion of Russia, ending in Moscow, and his subsequent retreat over one of the coldest winters in recent history, in recent history for them anyway. And this has been considered one of the best visual graphics ever created. And Menard was sort of a pacifist. He hated war, and nowhere in this map and its corresponding text does he mention Napoleon or war in specific. He says basically this is a map figure of the army of France in the Russian campaign, and that's as close as he gets to talking about war. The diagram shows the size of Napoleon's army as it entered Russia, and through a series of battles all the way going to Moscow, the size of the army decreased. The black lines show his retreat. Basically, the map outlines how significantly Napoleon's army suffered in that retreat. And Menard was making a point not just that, okay, here's how much Napoleon's army got trashed in this campaign, but how visual information or quantitative information could be displayed visually to make a point without even using text. As far as education goes, one of the big things we like to do is to help students confront some of the assumptions they have and to do research to determine whether or not those assumptions are warranted. That's the essence of critical thinking. There's a common thought that the polluting emissions in the Midwest cause acid deposition in the Northeast, and that causes a lot of forest kill and so on. But if you actually have the students sit down and map the data out, you find that most of the sulfate deposition occurs pretty much in the areas they are created. And while there is some trend further towards the Northeast, most of it is created and deposited in place. You can confront the same types of assumptions through history. We have all of these images of the Dust Bowl days, a pivotal point in American history that created a great deal of both political upheaval and political improvements, and also generated a great deal of literature and cultural things that are still enduring today. The main idea behind the Dust Bowl is that it was created as a result of agriculture. And that's the basic story that probably most people have heard. Well, a few years ago, a GIS historian decided to challenge that assumption, or not to challenge, but to look at it. And the outline there is the Dust Bowl storm region, the main storm region for the big years of 1935 and 36, with an assessment of where the primary cropland areas were in the preceding 10 years. Basically, there is very little spatial correlation there. But when you map that same region with percent difference from average rainfall, or basically how big of a drought that area was in, you see that the Dust Bowl was largely created from the significant drought of the time, not so much from the agriculture. So the conclusions are that regardless of agricultural activities going on in the Dust Bowl region, in the case of a significant drought, we may likely see Dust Bowls again. Many professors in a variety of disciplines are including GIS in their curriculum now. Here's a musicology class from somewhere in Boston. Not one of the big schools, this is one of the smaller ones. And the prof sent his students out to gather information on Latin American cultural events, theater, music, arts, those sorts of things, and to gather information from marketplaces, from street pole signs, from advertisements, from the internet, everywhere they could find it, and go out and gather some database information. And they put this information together with census tract data relating to Brazilian ancestry in particular. Basically, it provided them both a way to explore the cultural dimensions of music, but also to come to some ideas along the point of where cultures move, they tend to take their music with them. And so the students did a variety of individual projects as a result, and one student did her final project looking at cities with polka playing radio stations as compared with population claiming some Polish ancestry across the United States. Again, showing that populations tend to take their music with them. Journalism is a common use for mapping in GIS, and here's a map of electoral votes in the 2004 election. A couple of interesting things about this map. First off is that this map basically sort of implies the idea that there was a landslide in the election, and I think George Bush only got 51 or 52% of the popular vote. Basically, maps like this can give the impression that there is a landslide, but in fact it's people who vote, not land, and so the huge areas of red there don't necessarily imply a landslide, they just show the electoral votes. Another thing that's interesting about this map is that typically we see reds for Republicans and blues for Democrats. And in map making, we always talk about be careful with the use of red. Red is a color that signifies alarm, that signifies danger. And so the National Atlas of the United States, well, perhaps not for this reason, but one might argue the case that they changed the color scheme around, and this is the U.S. government's National Atlas, to reverse the traditional color scheme, and perhaps because of that issue of red. We'll see what happens in the next turn of elections to see if those color schemes stay the same. Then, of course, you can do the Comedy Central type of journalism. There's a map that looks at county majority vote for the election in each county across the United States, where red voted for Bush and blue voted for Kerry. So, Jon Stewart would argue, if tornadoes are acts of God, and tornadoes only occur in red counties, does God hate Republicans? Perhaps a spurious correlation, but interesting arguments could be made and generate some interesting class discussions as well from all sorts of perspectives.